What a day for surprise. We found a lonely Toby waiting lonesomely at Tidmouth station. He was near some empty coaches which seemed to have been evacuated. He seemed scared and was mumbling to himself repeatedly. We tried to approach him, but kept reversing. Maybe this whole thing has taken a toll on him. I wouldn't be surprised. We examined the coaches, which were the red and cream fast passenger service ones that James was pulling earlier. Did he leave half his train behind? I don't recall seeing a break coach on his train, so it must have been the case. It also explains why there was so much luggage loose on the platform. We've decided to raid the station to see if any food was being stored in the offices. We found a few pastries inside of the station, but they were pretty stale. Either way, they tasted pretty good. Everything just happened at once. My hand is shaking right now, and I'm barely able to write. We wanted to ask Toby what happened to him when the blast happened. He seemed petrified, but also on the verge of tears. While James had just finished shunting his coach together for his next train, Toby was traveling down the line to collect Henrietta from Crovan's Gate Works, who was getting her windows replaced and a new coat of paint. He soon stopped at a signal at Tidmouth and talked to James, who was complaining about how he had to shunt his own coaches. Then the sirens blared loud and long, and the sight of the explosion lit up the sky and caused their ears to ring. James and Toby were petrified and urged people to get into the coaches. However, only after the train was coupled up, and there was no time to grab the shunter's pole and hook them together. Toby then realized that Henrietta would be endangered and might be affected by the blast. James yelled at him to push the brake coach and two others up the line with him to protect the passengers. Toby didn't listen. The brown box slid towards the works. James furiously pulled the coaches out of the station as fast as possible while leaving 3 behind in the process, while the determined tram engine headed straight towards the direction of the blast. As the shockwave hit the station, some of the stranded passengers ran for the hills. Others stayed in the station. They've all left by now, but it explains why the interiors of the offices are completely trashed. Toby proceeded to cry, saying how he was sorry and how he just wanted Henrietta to be safe. Honestly, I was just glad he was safe. I learned that wood isn't affected by radiation, so it made logical sense that he was fine. Then a voice called out from inside of him out of the blue, in a deep groggy voice, which said something like,
"It's all your fault, Toby. You were greedy and made them suffer."
We peeked inside, and what we saw was horrifying. Toby's smoke box had become sentient. A mangled face which resembled one of a troublesome truck, with heat burns mostly on the right side of its face, was located right behind where Toby's face would be. That was when it hit me. He wasn't mumbling to himself earlier. He was talking to the voice inside his head. After waiting around for a bit longer, we decided to head on back down the line. We did not want to risk Toby or Fireface getting injured, so Edward and I conceived a plan for us to pull him down the line. As we traveled on, Toby was breaking down more and more. Edward, being the wise sage he was, used his kind words to calm Toby down and reminded him that they would find Henrietta. I felt a sudden jerk as Edward applied his brakes. We peered out from the side of his cab and saw Thomas steaming idly in front of us with his signature triumphant smirk. Leon had stuck his head out of the cab, saying how good of a job he did for driving his first steam engine. We heard Thomas' other cab door open, as the mysterious figure leaned out of the cab door. He was rather rotund, really quite round, but we didn't see him like that to us. He seemed to be a shining light in a deep dark pit. Sir Bertram Topham had. We decided to go back to Tidmouth Sheds, since we needed a place to rest for the night, as well as a place where Topham can tell us what the heck is going on. We still remained the goal of protecting Toby and Fireface, so Thomas was coupled up to the back of Toby. Luckily, we arrived at Tidmouth Sheds safely, and Toby, Edward and Thomas were tucked away in the sheds. We took some wood we found and made a bonfire outside, and the four of us gathered around it as Topham explained the answers to all the questions we've been asking for a while. He was at Tidmouth Station when the power plant exploded and was waiting patiently in his office for James's train to arrive. He headed out of his office at the sound of an engine's whistle, just in time to see James and Toby arrive. As he prepared to board the passenger train, he heard sirens in the distance, followed by a huge blast. He covered his ears tightly as the passengers crowded into James's coaches. After Toby went to retrieve Henrietta, James departed, leaving half of his coaches behind at the platform. With nowhere to run, Topham prepared for the worst. His top hat was blown off of his head before he dropped to the ground, followed by a shower of scattered glass. Luckily, Topham was for the most part unharmed by the falling glass, but the other passengers weren't so lucky. He got up, grabbed his head back, his vision blurry, ears ringing, heart racing, and he started to look around. He noticed a passenger bleeding heavily from his face, and the controller panicked and ran to the parking lot beside the station, where his car was located. He entered his car, and he sped off in the direction of Tidmouth Sheds. All he was thinking about was the well-being of his beloved engines. He had to find out what or who had caused this, and where his engines were located. The road was rough, probably from the shockwave. It wasn't long before Sir Topham had hit a pothole. The car seemed stuck, so he got out, had a look at it, and noticed the tire was flat. He was frustrated and worried at the same time. He wished that he hadn't left his spare tire at home. At this moment, he had no choice but to walk to a nearby workman's hut. It was constructed not so long ago. It took him a little while to get there, but he was happy to see it. He found food, water, a bed, and a flashlight. So Topham decided to spend the next 3 days in the hut, while he was thinking and planning his next move. He made the decision to leave on the morning of July 7th. Topham started his trek towards Tidmouth Sheds. It was a bit of a walk without his car. As he was walking, he could see Tidmouth Sheds come into view. As he arrived, he could hear strange moaning and groaning, along with the saddened cries of an engine coming from the sheds. He also noticed some mutated trucks jammed into the turntable as he walked past. He was shocked to see what had happened to Thomas. Topham took a moment and comforted the poor tank engine and told him he could help him. He spent the night in Thomas's cab as Topham cuddled up in Thomas. They talked for hours about their experiences during the fallout until they fell asleep. The morning was quick to arrive as Topham woke up really early as the sun started to rise. He got to work removing the mutated trucks from the turntable. Afterwards, he came back to Thomas. Topham then released Thomas's brakes and rolled him over to the water tower. After he heard the sound of an engine coming, he hid in the shed until the coast was clear. The engine he heard approach was Edward, and he only found this out after Leonard spotted him near the sheds. Topham then declared that he knew that this wasn't any ordinary accident. There was someone behind this, and he had a hunch on who it was. He didn't tell us, but did mention he had a spotty past with them. Whoever it could have been, they really wanted to ruin everything that he loved on this island. As we had our small bonfire, I could hear Thomas and Edward discussing who it could have been. Thomas said it could be Diesel, but Edward told him that Diesel was sent back to the mainland years ago. It was nice seeing someone Edward could talk to again. We've decided to get some sleep early, since we were going to try to meet back up with Henry and the others the next day. Despite everyone's chatty mood, Toby was silent, looking extremely tense. So much had happened in the span of an hour, it's insane. We woke up to Toby having an episode with Fireface, and he sounded like he was fighting for control. He was begging for it to stop and was able to roll himself back and forth like someone pacing in circles while in deep thought. Something was going to happen, and I woke up the others. We stood back as Toby screamed in pain, his bell ringing continuously. He was at his breaking point. The voice inside of him were telling him to end it, that he was just a pile of wood ready to rot. Leonard lit Thomas's fire, and Thomas slowly puffed towards him. Thomas asked him what was wrong, but all Toby told him was to take care of Henrietta for him, and then it happened. Topham knew what was going to happen and sprinted towards the tram engine that had taken him out on his holiday trip all those years ago, but it was too late. Topham, Sydney, Leonard and I watched in horror as the tram engine rolled back and dashed down the line as fast as he could, slamming his wooden body into the arm of the breakdown crane. It struck straight into the middle of his face, and the sound of splintering wood and flesh was heard as the tram engine fell apart. The arm struck Fireface too, and the hook snagged his face and killed it on impact. It was one of the most gruesome scenes I've ever witnessed. Topham fell to his knees and broke down crying in front of the collapsed shell of his beloved number 7. We tried to consolidate him, but he did something none of us expected. He got up and said, "Toby, you will be remembered as the great engine you were, and you will live on in our hearts forever. This can never be allowed to happen again. We will find out who has done this to our beloved engines, and we will bring them to justice. I promise you, Toby, your death will not be for nothing." It was a final send-off to a favorite tram before we had to go.